Tuck?
May I please support? Okay, well, thanks for hanging in there with us. The defense talked about there was no investigation in this case. These officers scoured the earth for that Prius. They looked at hundreds of hours of surveillance. They pulled surveillance off city buses to find evidence in this case. And they pulled that needle out of the haystack. Hundreds of thousands of pages of phone records and financial records and other data was analyzed in this case. This was incredibly thorough. It took years. They drove from here to Tampa multiple times, mowed down the side of the road looking for a firearm. They got authorization to conduct 24-hour surveillance at this woman's residence and on their phones. I'm not used to being the defense, but I will tell you that the jury instructions that the judge has read you indicate that your feelings about the lawyer should not influence your verdict in any way. So to the extent that you think that I am this corrupt, desperate monster that Mr. DeCoste has portrayed, you must separate that from your evaluation of this case and base your verdict on the evidence in the case and the law that the judge has given you, and that alone, that is your oath as jurors. They have attempted to inflame you against me, to invoke your sympathy on behalf of their client who has children, who is confined in the jail. She's on trial for murder. She'll never see her kids again. You're not supposed to let sympathy interfere with your verdict. Dan Markel will never see his kids again. And he didn't get a choice in that. She had a choice. And this trial is about her choices. Not what I did, not what Luis Rivera did. He's already been convicted. He's not on trial. These two are. To suggest that these wiretaps somehow are not evidence of Ms. Magbanua being right in the middle of this thing is just, listen to him again. Listen to him again. And if those don't put her right in the middle, then I guess you know what you have to do. What possible motive would I have to prosecute an innocent person? In what universe would that assist me in getting the Adelsons? Someone requesting a trial does not mean they're innocent. Every criminal defendant has a right to a trial. She didn't flee the country, so she must be innocent. She would never risk not seeing her children. A mother wouldn't or couldn't be capable of doing something like this. Well, who would be capable of doing something like this? So heinous. Yet it happens. We all know it happens all the time. And we talked about it in jury selection. What does a murderer look like? Are they a certain race? Are they a certain creed? Are they a certain sex? No, they come from all walks of life, in every shape and size. Don't excuse her conduct because of sympathy. It is unfortunate. It is sad. This is sad for everybody involved. But this is about those defendants' choices that are sitting across the room from you. Defense showed you a picture of the girls on the beach with a credit card in it. I can't see the name on that credit card. I don't understand how that means that she bought drinks that day. And I don't understand what in the heck that has to do with the murder. How did I hide or misguide you? I don't agree with the defense's characterization of how this evidence was presented, but you got the evidence, and you all will make a determination as to whether or not it's any good. You've been instructed on the defense, a couple things, defendant statements and also defendant testifying. Those were both in your packet of jury instructions, and we have one of each in this case. Defendant Garcia gave a statement to the police in which he indicated that he had never been to Tallahassee and that he knows lots of Luis Riveras. He couldn't possibly narrow it down to the one that's his best friend since childhood, the one he did a murder with in Tallahassee on July 18, 2014. This statement is obviously untruthful, as it is completely refuted by all the other evidence in the case. The evidence against Mr. Garcia is overwhelming. He shot Dan Markel, a man he didn't even know. And they want to talk about, oh, they wouldn't be so stupid as to bring Shadrick into the motel. They shot this man in broad daylight in Benton Hills. They don't care about being stupid. Why would he do it? For a few bucks, which he blew immediately to impress and win back Ms. McBanoa? His conduct is the very definition of cold-blooded. And Defendant McBanoa chose to take the witness stand. We didn't hear very much about that. She doesn't know anything about the crime at all, so how can she be cross-examined? She don't know nothing. Even after the bump and her involvement in investigating the man that approached Mrs. Markel, gosh, I can't talk. Even after the bump and her involvement, she was enlisted by Charlie to go investigate this person that confronted his mother. Even after that, she didn't know anything about the murder. She's telling y'all she didn't even know the man was killed, period. Until Garcia got arrested. What did we learn through her testimony? We learned that Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera both have reputations for violence. That fits. We learned that she lied to Charlie Adelson about sleeping with Sigfredo Garcia, and she lied to Sigfredo Garcia about the fact that she was sleeping with Charlie Adelson. She was playing them against each other. She lied to Charlie Adelson multiple times about whether she was calling that undercover number, about knowing who Tudo and Tato are. She lied to Yindra about Dan Markel being in a car accident. She lied about not knowing what a burner phone was and then later admitted to going to Walmart to get one. She lied to the IRS and filed fraudulent tax returns. She lied to DCF to scam the government for insurance while she saved up money to buy a breast augmentation. And she wants you to believe that she's telling the truth about having no knowledge about this homicide. Not being able to remember virtually anything about the question she was being asked unless her lawyer put the answer in the question. She's telling the truth about having no memory as to what the conversation was between she and Charlie when he's telling her about a Latin king threatening his mother and saying her name. I would think she'd be real interested in that conversation. But she has no memory of it. You have been told this whole trial that she was working remotely on a weekend basis for the Adelson Institute. They bent over backwards to tell us about how she was working. And she gets on the stand and says, I didn't work there. I didn't go on the weekends. I worked for Charlie as his personal assistant. Well, why is Donna stroking the checks if she's working for Charlie? She admitted that she got gifts from Charlie post-breakup, and I said, we went through all the gifts, and some of them, they say were loans, and whatever. She got stuff from him, and she was not dating him anymore. Why? And I asked her, why are you so special? Well, I know why she's so special, because she's got Charlie. She's got him, and he has to keep her happy. That's why she gets that stuff. That's why he called her to investigate the bump, because they're involved in this thing together. There was a $100,000 reward for information leading to an arrest on the unsolved murder of Dan Markel. Do you think this woman wouldn't have turned that number in a heartbeat and collected that reward if she didn't have anything to do with it? Believe it. She also admitted that she was speaking in code on the wire and has no good reason for that. Why was she speaking in code? There's only one reason to speak in code. I'm really not trying to be cute. There is not a reason to speak in code when you're giving somebody a phone number. And then I would offer you the following question and answer. Question, did you talk to Luis Rivera on the day of the money drop? Answer, yes. So that kind of implies there was a money drop. Luis Rivera didn't say, got 8 minutes, I'm sorry you guys. All right, Luis Rivera. There's this idea out there that
I'll keep track of time, Miss Norris.
Oh, she's not right? Is it less than 8 minutes?
No, you have 12.
Okay, thank you. I'll only take 8. All right, so Luis Rivera, the idea is that he did not say Catherine Magbano was named in the initial meetings, and somehow he was told, you're not going to get a deal unless you say her name. This is just not true. Nobody has testified to that. The lawyer saying it does not make it true. We talked about his inconsistencies, and we talked about inconsistencies at jury selection. If Mr. Rivera is smart enough to memorize this whole case, I can't even keep it straight, and regurgitate it on command to you, then why doesn't he remember which trip he got the ticket on? You know, there are natural inconsistencies in his testimony. The man has a 6th grade education and reads on a 3rd grade level, and they want you to believe he understood the evidence well enough to falsify the testimony to get all these little intricate things correct. I mean, the reason why you believe him is not because he's some great guy. He's the worst. He's a killer. You believe him because he's telling you what you already know. He's telling you what the rest of the evidence in the case supports and tells you. He's not studying the evidence and building his lies within that framework. They actually said he's a smart guy. The guy misspelled his own name on the witness stand. Lius. The man rented a car in his own name to come do a murder. Can't compare him to Jeffrey Lacoste, who is a professor. If he was going to lie to cut a deal, and if I'm so desperate to get the Adelsons, as they claim, why didn't I just tell him, or have someone tell him, to say the Adelsons hired him? And if the Adelsons actually hired him, as Mr. Garcia wants you to believe, as Mr. DeCoste wants you to believe, then why didn't he just flip on the Adelsons? He's flipping on his best friend from childhood and his best friend's wife. Why would he do that? If he was actually hired by Charlie Adelson, he would tell us that. Think about whether the inconsistencies that have been cited by the defense are truly inconsistent. Use caution in distinguishing between nitpicking versus an inconsistency that's going to constitute a reasonable doubt. Is the statement truly inconsistent, or is it a routine situation where the witness is failing to recall every detail? Does the witness appear to be fabricating his testimony? These are questions only you can answer when trying to evaluate any inconsistencies that were present in the witness's testimony in this case. And I would submit that saying things like Wendy in one statement and the lady with the kids in another is not a close call. Those statements are not inconsistent. When he got the speeding ticket, whether the picture of Dan Markel was black and white or color, all things that we don't really care about. And it's up to you. Why? If he was not hired by Garcia, would he be giving up Garcia? It doesn't make any sense. The defense says Garcia would never do this job for Charlie Adelson. Well, that may be true, but you'd be surprised how much people would set aside for the right amount of money. He also would do anything for Catherine Magbano, and she was the one asking. And thirdly, I'm not sure he knew he was doing it for Charlie Adelson, because he told Rivera they were there for Wendy. His understanding, Rivera's understanding, which he got from Garcia, is that they were there for Wendy, to help Wendy get her kids back, not for Charlie. Wendy's the sister, but I don't know. He was pretty mad in that phone call, I think, when he found out that Charlie was in the picture. The Wendy sighting. Okay, so the evidence was that it is possible that they saw Wendy on the sidewalk based on the phone stuff. Yes, the kids went to daycare that day. Could she have gotten them out of daycare? It's possible. But I think what's more likely, I never heard him say that the woman he saw walked into the house. So y'all have to rely on your own memories. I thought he said he saw her on the sidewalk near the house and she walked up the sidewalk toward Dan Markel's house, like in that direction. So you've got these two guys driving around Benton Hills. They're sticking out like sore thumbs. They're high as kites. They're trying to basically do a murder, so they're probably paranoid. And they see a woman and a couple kids on the sidewalk. Garcia says to Rivera, "Oh, that's her. That's the lady." And what Rivera said is that when Katie called to tell them, y'all got to get this done tomorrow, that they said, "We saw Wendy," or "We saw the lady with the kids." So that was my memory of the evidence. You guys would rely on your own. Well, I have no reason to doubt that they saw somebody on the sidewalk. I cannot tell you that it was Wendy Adelson. I do not have that evidence. They have tried and tried to draw these links between, Rivera and some other Latin king coming up here, or Charlie dealing directly with Sigfredo Garcia in the absence of Ms. Magbanua, but there's just no evidence of it. And you have to base your verdict on the evidence. I mean, that's in the jury instructions. I'm not making it up. They have gotten creative in trying to, do the deep sea fishing thing, and you guys can take that back there and read the whole thing and make your own mind up. All right, let's erase. All right, so I want to talk just for a moment at the very end here about the shape of this conspiracy. It's like a train. They can be, a cluster. They can be like spokes of a wheel. But in this case, there really kind of appears that each of these people are isolated from the other one. Donna's only connection to the conspiracy is Charlie. Charlie's connection is, goes down the line like that. You can't get from the engine to the caboose without going through the middle. And the middle is Catherine Magbanua. Why did she pay for Garcia's lawyer? Not because the lawyer did anything wrong. I'm not throwing shade at him. She paid for another co-conspirator's attorney. That's relevant for your consideration and to whether or not this is a conspiracy. Just, all I want you to do is listen to The Wire again if you have any doubts about these two's guilt in this thing. Just because Catherine Magbanua didn't come to Tallahassee or pull the trigger herself does not mean that she is not just as guilty as the ones who did. She hired Garcia, who in turn hired Rivera, and she's the conduit between Dan Markel and the man that put a bullet in his head. Without her, none of this happens. Without her, we're not sitting here today. I'm concerned that you'll get back there and say, well, she didn't pull the trigger, and we'll just do conspiracy and solicitation. Consider all of the offenses and the evidence and whether it's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Do not let concerns about sentencing or ramifications, sympathies, other things like that bleed into your deliberations. Catherine Magbanua is just as guilty as Sigfredo Garcia in this phase of the trial where y'all are considering guilt for first-degree murder. The efforts to distract you from what this case is really about, including trying to make all these other links. Think about Rivera, but also, why do we believe Rivera? Because of the financial evidence, the wiretap, the phone activity, the iCloud messages, and the absence of any other reasonable explanation should all lead you to one conclusion. That image that I have, will you pull that out, please? This is the full picture. Not bits and pieces, the full picture. This is the clean window. Rivera was all in for this job. This was his best friend, whether it was a robbery or a murder or whatever. He would have been the shooter. It just didn't happen that way. Maybe not in front of the kids, but certainly he would have been the shooter. Rivera is not on trial, as I mentioned. He has been convicted of this crime. And yes, I do hope that every single person who has any culpability in the death of Dan Markel will be held accountable. Today, y'all are going to decide about these two. Does Rivera have a network of criminals he could call on? Yes, but there's no evidence that he did that in this case. Reasonable doubt is not a mere possible doubt, a speculative, imaginary, or forced doubt. There is no evidence that Charlie Adelson was buying drugs from Luis Rivera. The defense says it's not outside the realm of possibility. Well, of course not. Very few things are. But that's not what we deal in a court of law. This is reasonable doubt. It's not speculative. It's not possible. When you consider the big picture of this case, often the simplest explanation is the right one. You can have 15 different explanations for what happened to this man, 15 different explanations for the different pieces of evidence in this case. Oh, that spike of cash in July, well, I was working in the clubs and I had the best month of my life in the club and I can't remember anybody I was working with. You can explain away everything. And if it's one thing, then you can be very successful. Because, okay, I was working in the clubs. But when you start to look at everything else, what about the wire? What about everything else? You have to look at the whole totality of the evidence in this case. And when you do that, you are going to come back to what this case is really about. Dan Markel. Justice for Dan Markel. And there is only one verdict that speaks the truth in this case and that does justice in this case, and that is a verdict of guilty as charged for both defendants. Thank you so much.